If you've been fasting for a while, the idea of going back to 3 square meals a day or 4 meals a day sounds terrifying. That sounds horrible. The idea of, I've been feeling so good fasting and now all of a sudden I need to go back to eating 3 meals, that sounds so wrong and foreign to me. Okay, could there possibly be any downsides to fasting? It feels so good. When is it time to actually maybe reel it in a little bit or shorten the lengths of the fast? Let's break it down. The first one is you feel like you don't need food anymore. In some ways, it's a good thing because it means you're fat adapted and you don't have cravings anymore, and I get it. Okay, but when you start getting to a point where I just don't feel like I need food anymore, I feel like I could just fast. I hear it all the time. I feel like I could go for, 7 days, no problem. Okay, yeah, that's great, but at the same time, that's not something to be striving for. Okay, that means that your metabolism is slowing down to such a point where A, it's gonna be harder for you to burn fat, but B, the metabolic drivers, things are slowing down, but also there's some neuropsychology that could be going on there too. Remember that even anorexics, I'm not suggesting you're anorexic, but even anorexics will report feelings of euphoria when they are starving themselves. Okay, and it's not because it's the starvation itself, it's because they are working towards their goal. They are achieving what they are setting out to do, which is to get leaner. So there's a state of euphoria that comes along with that. With fasting, that can happen too, and it's happened with myself. I feel so good because I feel like I'm making progress. So just keep that in mind. There's a study that was published in the journal Trends in Neuroscience, and really interesting because it took a look at anorexic people versus non-anorexic people. And it found that when they were both satiated, like when they were full, their neurochemistry, their neuropsychological response to sugar was like the same. But in a fasted state, in a starvation state, anorexic people didn't really respond to sugar. They didn't they had like an aversion to it, right? Or an aversion. And it was just this whole different world. The point in me saying that is, as you get addicted and you start to get used to fasting so much, your brain chemistry kind of changes. It's okay to crave food. That's actually normal. In fact, that's a healthy response to crave food. So when you get to a point where you just want to not eat all the time, you don't have to stop fasting entirely, but shorten your fast down to like a 12-hour fast for a little while and just kind of get back on the horse that way.
I put a link down below for Thrive Market. I know this is a relevant pitch for them, but at the same time, it makes sense. There's a 30% off discount link down below. Thrive Market is an online membership-based grocery store, and it literally is their mission to make healthier food more available for people in areas that cannot get healthier food. They really wanted to make sustainability a real thing and be able to get real good, unprocessed, and even healthier processed food options into people's hands. So that link down below is a 30% off discount link for whatever you choose. You can fill up your grocery cart using that link, 30% off plus a free $60 gift. So 30% off whether you choose some beet chips or whether you choose siete tortilla chips instead of regular corn chips, or if you want jerky snacks or this or that. And a lot of the times it's gonna be much, much cheaper than you would find at many grocery stores. So that link is down below. It's in the top line of the description underneath this video. And again, 30% off and a free $60 gift.
The next one, number 2, is a very important one. When you cannot follow the simple rules of breaking a fast anymore. You see, your first instinct is to get mad at me, right? I see it a lot, right? You have too many rules when it comes down to breaking a fast, Thomas. Too many rules and this and that. And I understand I put a lot of bumpers up. But the other side of the equation is that it's not that hard to break a fast properly. It just requires control. I have pretty simple rules, okay? No high glycemic carbohydrates, right, when you break a fast, unless you know what you're doing, okay? Low levels of saturated fat because it's hard to digest them and ends up having an increase in lipopolysaccharides. Have a small protein-rich meal first, and then 2 to 3 hours later, then start adding more food in. Those are really the rules. But what happens is we get this natural impulse to want to binge, okay, as we start fasting too much, because we start associating fasting with a fasting and binging mentality. There's a study that was published in the American Journal of Psychiatry that was interesting that found that people that would binge eat would get a huge state of euphoria upon beginning their binge, which if you start looking at your relationship with fasting can tell you a lot. If you start realizing that you're enjoying fasting because you like the quick hit of being able to eat food at the end of your fast, you are fasting for the wrong reasons. Then you're creating this like binge and fasting mentality, which could be very dangerous, and you have to be very, very careful with it. So if you find that, hey, it's getting hard for me to follow these rules, then maybe it's time again to just shorten the fast. I'm not saying you have to stop fasting. Shorten the fast to a 12-hour time-restricted feeding window. And another thing that you can do to possibly make it a little bit easier to break your fast properly is during your fast, keep your electrolytes stable. Okay, sometimes that is sort of a confounding factor that people don't think about. If your electrolytes are out of whack, it can throw off cravings, it can make it so that you think you want food when you don't, and it can make it so it's harder to break your fast properly. The next one is one that was a telltale sign for me. Okay, that is feeling weaker, feeling like I'm not recovered, and just feeling like my strength is going down. Now, in some cases, it extends even more, like muscle loss, all the way down to reaching a plateau. Your fat loss is stopping. But don't let that mess with your head too much, because sometimes that can be psychosomatic and the mirror messing with your head. The simple fact of the matter is that there's pretty heavy evidence. Like, there's a study that was published in the journal Trends in Endocrinology and Metabolism. This particular study demonstrated that when we fast, we have an increase in human growth hormone, an increase in ketones that protect our muscle. Okay, yeah, to an extent, but if you are making fasting a lifestyle and you're fasting so much, think about what's happening here. Okay, eventually you're going to get to a point where there's not enough growth hormone and ketones in the world to protect all of your muscle. Okay, at a certain point, about 60% of your cerebral energy can run from ketones. The other 40% still needs to come from glucose, and normally it's going to come from, breaking down fatty acid glycerol backbones. It's going to come down to breaking down muscle glycogen. But if you're not supplying your body with fuel and you're fasting so frequently and so much, what is your body going to do? It's going to have to make up that 40% for your brain from your muscle tissue, which is going to cause you to feel what? Super stiff, lack of recovery. You're going to feel weak. You're going to lose some muscle. Sometimes it's noticeable, sometimes it's not. Okay, it's not fun, and you will notice it. If you start feeling like your strength is going down, you need to take a break from fasting. I repeat, if your strength goes down, you feel like you're losing muscle, you feel like you're not recovering and you're stiff, take a week off. Your body is always going to prioritize your brain, okay? It's going to prioritize energy for your brain, and that means that if it has to burn up muscle in the process, it will, because your best chance of survival is providing fuel to your brain, not being 3% body fat. This next one is a little bit more specific towards women. However, it can be kind of twisted to work for men too, right? Now, this is an abnormality when it comes down to your menstrual cycle. You see, there are some studies that demonstrate that when women that are already relatively lean fast for 72 hours or so, they start to have a change in the rhythm of their luteinizing hormone pulses, which means that their brain is just not sending the proper signal to their ovaries, so their follicle stimulating hormone, luteinizing hormone levels get all out of whack, and that can completely throw off the menstrual cycle. Well, this is mainly in women that are relatively lean, but the simple fact is that if you're fasting a lot, you're going to get to that lean state relatively quick, and that could pose an issue. But the other component we have to address is that our leptin levels, when we fast, our leptin levels are going to decrease. Low levels of leptin are associated with disrupted follicle stimulating hormone and luteinizing hormone levels, specifically in women, okay? So too much fasting is going to manifest in just dysregularity when it comes down to your cycles. So I would say if you start finding that like 1 to 3 cycles are disrupted, the simplest thing that you can do is let's go ahead and shorten my fasting lengths, or shorten or decrease the frequency of how often I'm fasting. And with men, one of the first things you'll notice is a decrease in libido. Your leptin levels go down. Yes, and full disclaimer, a lot of times bringing your leptin levels down can be a good thing because it can help out leptin sensitivity, yada, yada. But this video would be 17 hours long, so let's not go there. Okay, take a little break, let the cycle sort of restart, and then go back to fasting. The next one is your sleep patterns, which I cannot overstress, okay? It is normal when you first start fasting to have some disruption with your sleep. Okay, that doesn't mean you're automatically fasting too much if you went on your first fast and you didn't sleep well. That is normal. Fasting triggers an adrenaline response, an noradrenaline response. But if we get ourselves into this constant state of heightened cortisol levels, heightened adrenaline, eventually we are going to make it so we are sitting in the sympathetic nervous system all the time. If you are constantly in a caloric deficit, your body is constantly going to be seeking for food, meaning it's going to be harder to sleep. If you are starving and you're supposed to be finding food, your body's going to do what it can from an electrical standpoint to keep you awake until you finally metabolically are so run down that you take a big dirt nap. Okay, so it's very important that you pay attention to this. Fasting in general, in a normal, healthy fashion, will actually restore your circadian clock genes. Okay, it can actually help you with that. But there's a very fine line between fasting enough and restoring your sleep and fasting too much and triggering this constant stress response. There's a study that was published in the journal Clinical Endocrinology that found that a 2-day fast actually reduced melatonin levels by 19%. Okay, what this can tell us is that when our body is not in the right state to be fasting, it can drop our melatonin levels and make it harder to fall asleep. The point is not to say that you're ruining your body. The point is to say that it's a very clear surface level indicator that it's time to take a break. And you don't have to just throw in the towel for a month and start eating 7 meals at Jack in the Box every single day. All you got to do is just reduce your fasting length down to 12 hours for a little bit, or reduce it down to 2 to 3 days per week, or just take a week off. The body is incredibly resilient. You need to stay on top of your game mentally so you don't let fasting control you. I'll see you tomorrow.